Set of the legislature, our majority floor leader in the Senate, Senator Michael Sanchez, said water was the sleeper issue of the session, and he was spot on. Every day we see the magnitude of the water challenges our state is facing continuing to grow. We've got lawsuits in the U.S. Supreme Court. We've got projections of zero agriculture water delivery this year on the lower Rio Grande. We've got senior water rights in adjudicated basins at the bottom of stream systems that are not getting the water they're legally entitled to. We've got endangered species issues, recreation issues, the list goes on and on. What's undisputed is the economic impact to our state, which I think is tremendous. We're going to highlight this morning some bills that are in the state Senate, which touch on water planning, conservation, more resources for our courts, and clarifying some water statutes. We're not here by any means to suggest these bills themselves are some kind of silver bullet. I think it's fair to say we're barely scratching the surface. What's important, I think, and I think we'll all agree, is that everything related to water needs to be on the table moving forward, and we're at the beginning of an incredibly important discussion. So what I'll do is have each senator this morning will make a brief statement and describe some of the legislation they have. And what I'd ask is the press wait until we're finished, and then we'll yield to questions. Senator Smith.
Thank you very much. In the Senate Finance Committee, we're dealing with tax issues. We're dealing with trying to fund government within the guidelines of our revenue stream. But when we focus on the tax incentives that are being requested, I submit that we can offer tax incentives and virtually make companies tax-free in the state of New Mexico, but they will not expand or they will not come because of the limitations of our infrastructure and our resources in the state of New Mexico. And obviously that creates major problems for not just this generation, but future generations. The water situation in New Mexico, we talk about diverting the water, and in many areas of the state, they believe that's a new concept. We're already doing some of that in the state of New Mexico. But the bottom line is that this state, a desert state, future economic development turns with water. And as a result, obviously, people are turning to the state and saying, well, what are the resources? And we proposed a initial planning bill of $400,000 to get this issue started, at least in the discussion phase, and see if we cannot rectify and mitigate some of the water situations that we're in throughout the state of New Mexico. I'm from southern New Mexico. I have the Gila in my district, and I also have the Rio Grande and Elephant Butte in my district. Those are huge issues in the state of New Mexico, and so we're looking forward to working collectively with all New Mexicans to try and resolve our water problem. Thank you.
Great. Senator Papen.
Thank you and good morning. We're going to have to meet the challenges statewide. As we're looking at Texas suing New Mexico right now at the Supreme Court, that could come down in the water delivery, and it could even impact as far as telling our farmers that they cannot even pump water. If that happens, then the whole lower Rio Grande and our valley and our agriculture goes away. And agriculture in the state of New Mexico brings in $10 billion a year to this state. So we're scared, and we have to look and try and find a way to solve some of these problems. And I think there's several bills out there. I know Senator Cervantes also has a bill to try and put some dollars in there. But we must look at this problem, and it is serious. It's probably more serious than anything else we're going to be facing. Thank you.
Great. Joseph.
Well, Senator Wirth mentioned water as the sleeper issue for the session, and we're here, I guess, for a wake-up call. There was no mention of water in the state of the state, and that troubles, I know, a number of us. We have to begin to put water on the forefront of the minds of New Mexicans. A little more than a year ago, the state engineer's office recognized that our farm in Dona County was entitled to 4.5 acre-feet of water based on a history of use. 4.5 feet. We didn't get half of that last year. We didn't get half of that half. We didn't get half of that half. In fact, last year, instead of getting 4.5 feet of water on our farm, we got about 4 inches. And this year, for the very first time, we're being told by Alpha Butte Irrigation District to expect no water. 0. This will be the first time in the entire history of the Rio Grande project that goes back to about the early 1900s, about 1905. The Alpha Butte Irrigation Dam, Alpha Butte Dam was completed in about 1913, 1915. For the first time in the entire history of that project, there is talk of no water at all to be delivered in the Rio Grande to farmers in the lower Rio Grande. Now, Mary Kay pointed out the economic consequences. I want you to know that Dona County, which I represent along with Senator Papen and Senator Smith, is the largest county in the state of New Mexico for agricultural production, number 1. And not only that, but it ranks 15th nationally for the production of nuts, fruits, pecans, and fruit products. 15th nationally. All of those industries, all of those parts of our economy, the banking that's associated with that, the lenders, the lands, the farming, the people that supply those are all at jeopardy and risk. That's particularly compounded now by a decision by the state Supreme Court last year, and now then within the last month lawsuits filed by, or a single lawsuit filed by the state of Texas in the United States Supreme Court. The potential consequences of that lawsuit, I'm told, going back to 1938 for under delivery of water may be reaching $1 billion or more as a damage claim, potential damage claim for the state. I also want to put this in some context that not only are we reliant in our entire state on the economy of farming and agriculture, but the fact of the matter is that farmers have been able to manage for now 3 years of small deliveries or less than a foot of delivery by pumping. And the lawsuit by the state of Texas is intended to challenge that groundwater pumping. None of this even addresses the consequences of that groundwater pumping to our other industries, to our municipalities, to mutual domestics, and to all the other users. And so the wake-up call is here. We're glad you can join us for this early in the morning. And Mr. Chairman, I'll give it to you for other questions.
Great, and let me just say, this obviously is, it's not a regional issue, it's a New Mexico issue, it's not a partisan issue. We really appreciate Senator Nevill is here to talk a bit about a bill he has introduced with respect to funding for the courts.
We have a situation in the state where in San Juan County, we divert a large amount of water from the San Juan Basin that goes into the Rio Grande for the San Juan County, San Juan Chama diversion. That diversion supplies a substantial amount of water to the communities along the Rio Grande, including Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and so forth. In addition, the Navajo settlement has been underway for some time. That's put some pressure on what concerns there are as far as water situation up in San Juan County. You've already heard about all of the concerns down in Dona County, so I have proposed that we try to increase the judicial presence in those two areas so that we can try to resolve some of these issues. San Juan County has a huge amount of surface water. New Mexico gets about 11% of that that we use. San Juan is the largest flow river in the state of New Mexico, and because of the settlement, the Navajo settlement, and the diversion to the Rio Grande, plus our existing irrigators, we've got a lot of people who are very concerned about the adjudication process that's going on in San Juan County. The same is true. You've heard about the water pressures down in Dona. I'm sure that there's a great deal of concern among the landowners and the water users down in Dona County that we need to get these adjudication situations resolved as quickly as possible. The bill I've introduced increases the judgeships in San Juan County area and the Dona County area so that we can try to work on these adjudications and get some of these, the baseline resolved. We can't deal with all of the issues that are out there if we don't know how much water we've got, and each landowner knows how much water he has to deal with as far as his own personal operation. That's what this bill does, is try to increase the judicial presence in those two counties initially, and then I think we need to probably go broader at some point in the future to try to get something where we can get the adjudication process statewide advanced more quickly.
Great, so just a couple of bills I've introduced that I want to mention, and I think we're going to be hearing these bills relatively soon in the Conservation Committee first, and then Senate Finance Committee and through the process. Two bills, Senate Bill 479 and 480, deal with what I call the domestic well double dip. You know, if we have agricultural land where water rights have been sold, there should not be new subdivisions using domestic wells. That's what Senate Bill 479 does. Senate Bill 480 is a bill that we had on the law. It was on the books in the mid-90s, and it basically said new subdivisions over a set amount, and it deals with the size of the lots. But new subdivisions need to be able to show that they've got water. And so that's a bill that needs to come back, and it's a discussion we need to have. Finally, let me just point out, also as Senator Smith mentioned, part of this is having the information. And those regional water plans are critical. They tie into our state water plan. Another bill I've introduced, Senate Bill 484, is to put together a working group of experts from our top institutions, New Mexico State, New Mexico Tech, UNM, to study and report back to us on water supply and demand issues, climate variability issues, the economic consequences as we move forward over a 20-year period. It is critical that we begin to look out and project where we're headed so that we as policymakers can address these issues. Let me just conclude by saying this isn't as I mentioned, it's not a regional issue, it's not a partisan issue, it's a statewide issue. And for everyone watching or listening, it's an issue that involves each one of us as New Mexicans. We are all in this together, and we all need to step up and navigate our way through as we move forward. And I'm certainly very encouraged to be having this discussion at the legislative level, and we'd be happy to take some questions. Yeah, Alex.
Senator Wirth, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little more on this idea of a regional issue, because there may be viewers in Albuquerque who say, this looks like it's way down south. It's far away from me. It's not an issue that. Can you spell out a little bit more about exactly how this affects someone who's living in metropolitan Albuquerque?
Well, I sure can. Under our New Mexico water law system, we have a doctrine where we establish priorities for water users. And what's interesting here in New Mexico, and we're going to hear a lot of discussion about the lower Rio Grande and the lower Pecos, the Carlsbad Irrigation District, those are the more senior water users. And what folks in municipalities need to understand is that they generally have junior water rights. And what happens when there's a shortage under our legal system is the senior water rights have priority. And so what gets really interesting is when the senior water rights are on the bottom of the river, and you've got municipalities that are up north, everyone needs to understand what that means and how serious that can be. It's really time for us all to sit down around the table and see if we can figure out solutions. Certainly that's a better way to approach this than the litigation route. But the magnitude of the drought we're looking at, I think, puts everything in play. And that's why you're seeing, for the first time since I've been here, you're seeing lawsuits. And I think you're going to see more of that.
Can I add one thing? The Chama diversion supplies Albuquerque and Santa Fe with a substantial amount of their water currently. So that's coming out of the San Juan Basin. So the adjudications that are happening up there could directly, and the senior priorities and so forth, can directly affect what happens in Albuquerque as far as the water supply.
Can I just add one thing to that? We're fortunate because the director of Alpha Butte Irrigation District, Gary Esslinger, is here, the director of the Interstate Stream Commission, the Sal Lopez is here, the state engineer is here. We appreciate all of you being here. The reality is that this year there was an under-delivery to the reservoir, which is part of the delivery requirements to the lower Rio Grande, an under-delivery of 15,000 acre feet. And so that under-delivery is coming upstream, and that's the answer to your question, is the water's not getting through the middle Rio Grande and from northern New Mexico to the south, and inevitably that's potentially going to pit New Mexicans against New Mexicans unless we come up with the solutions in this legislative session.
Yeah, I have a question for Senator Smith. One of the things that's been discussed is the notion of water importation. You know, you, I guess, have talked about the idea of maybe a Gila pipeline, over to Las Cruces. Can you talk a little bit more about that idea and what role importation into the middle Rio Grande you think might play in working our problems?
Well, yeah, wasn't the first suggestion out there. Obviously, there was one in the Camado, Magdalena area to transfer to the Rio Grande. But what's taking place in southwest New Mexico, there's 14,000 water righted acres available for consumption in a 4-county region. The 4 counties have had a difficult time coming up with a unified project. We're running out of time. The witching hour, I do believe, on that is the end of 2014. This debate and this discussion has been going on for close to 10 years. In the event that we do not resolve that issue with a consensus project in the area, there's a perception that that water will flow on into Arizona. My take on this whole issue and the message is that we're going to keep that water in New Mexico for New Mexico's use because that's what it was legally approved for. And the last thing I want to do is send it to Arizona. And obviously, we're hoping to come up with a project in southwest New Mexico. But in the event that there's not a consensus on that, then I think it needs to go to a populated center where the cost to develop that project can be amortized over a large population. That's the thinking behind that. I also have another piece of legislation with an appropriation, it's a capital outlay bill, taking water from southeast New Mexico groundwater before it flows into the state of Texas and diverting that water back up into population centers. I want to send a message to Texas that we're going to fight this issue tooth and nail. And as a result, the water that you're now benefiting from in the El Paso area, groundwater, it stands a chance of being diverted back to population areas of Albuquerque and Santa Fe.
Peter, question of how will the 19 Pueblos and the Native Americans who command some uninterrupted resources be tied into part of this dialogue?
Well, there is no question that our tribal communities are obviously an essential part of the discussion. Generally, they've got the senior water rights. And so I think as we move forward, again, it's making sure that we've got the different players around the table, obviously in the legislative arena. And I think there's been an obvious effort to do that with the state engineer on a statewide level. It has to happen. Because again, those are senior water rights. And again, we're all in this together. And there's different levels of priority dates, but the fact of the matter is this is something that we are going to have to do together.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ethan?
2 questions. You mentioned climate variability. Am I close to my global warming? 2 things happened yesterday. First, there was an article published in Albuquerque Journal by the past president of the Middle Rio Grande Water Assembly titled "Time to Recognize Global Warming, Make Changes." And second, there was a hearing in the House Conservation Natural Resources Committee on fracking and other water issues. And we learned that each natural gas hydraulic fracturing well uses 1 to 3 million gallons of water, and there's thousands of wells. So is it time to consider a moratorium on fracking and use that water for more beneficial use? And second, how is water conservation part of this dialogue?
So let me say this, again, I think as I stated, everything needs to be on the table. And again, we're not necessarily all going to agree on every issue. But the fact of the matter is there are a huge variety of water uses, and we need to see if we can figure out ways that things can be done more efficiently. I personally think conservation is a huge part of the equation. For every one of us, for every area, we have to focus on conservation. You've also heard Senator Smith talk about moving some new water in. I think what's critical for folks to remember, and this is Senator Nevill made this point, but for the San Juan diversion right now, we wouldn't have water running through Albuquerque. And so, again, I think my response would be that the discussion needs to have everything on the table, and we've got to consider those options as we move forward. I do think that the issue of climate change is one, that some may want to debate. We may have, again, different opinions. I do think that as we face drought like we've never seen before, it ties right into this issue, and I think that's part of the reason that I'm looking for a long-term study that factors in these variables again so that we can have the tools moving forward. Anyone else? If not, thank you very much. We'll stick around. We're happy to answer questions.